Blood was still dripping from the knuckles of the most dangerous man in Chicago when the music stopped. The entire VIP section of the Onyx Lounge held its breath. Dawson Moretti, heir to the city's most brutal crime syndicate, had just put a bodyguard through a glass table. Security was paralyzed. The police were paid to look away. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak, except for a 24-year-old waitress with a tray of dirty martinis and 0 patience left. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She walked right into the lion's den and did the one thing that would either get her killed or change history. Chicago winters were unforgiving, but the air inside the Onyx Lounge was always set to a perfect climate-controlled 70 degrees. It smelled of old money, expensive leather, and on this particular Tuesday night, imminent violence. Dawson Moretti sat alone in the corner booth, a sprawling crescent of velvet reserved for the city's untouchables. At 27, Dawson was less of a man and more of a loaded weapon with a faulty safety catch. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's cars, the collar unbuttoned, to reveal the jagged edge of a tattoo climbing his throat. His eyes dark and glassy, with a mix of top-shelf scotch and suppressed rage, scanned the room. He was bored. And when Dawson Moretti was bored, things usually broke. I said. Dawson's voice was a low rumble, barely audible over the thumping bass. "Get this swill out of my face." The server, a trembling young man named Kevin, stammered. "Mr. Moretti, that's the Macallan 25. It's exactly what—" Dawson didn't let him finish. With a lazy backhand, he swept the crystal tumbler off the table. It shattered against the imported marble floor, sending shards and amber liquid flying across the VIP section. The room froze. Conversations died instantly. At the bar, the manager, a sweating man named Paulie, frantically signaled for security, but the bouncers looked at their shoes. They knew better. Last month, a bouncer had touched Dawson's arm to calm him down. That bouncer was currently eating through a straw at Mount Sinai Hospital. Dawson stood up. He wasn't overly tall, perhaps 6'1", but he occupied space with a predatory density. He kicked the table, sending it skidding into the shins of the terrifyingly silent Kevin. "You're all useless," Dawson spat, swaying slightly. "Vultures. Leeches." He reached for the bottle of Macallan, remaining on the table, gripping it by the neck like a club. That was when the atmosphere shifted. Sienna Brooks adjusted her apron, tightening the strings around her waist. She had been working a double shift. Her feet throbbed, her rent was 3 days late, and she had just spent 20 minutes unclogging the sink in the service bar. She watched the display of testosterone in the corner with the exhausted cynicism of someone who had seen too much of the ugly side of life. "Poorly," Sienna said, her voice calm. "He's going to smash the mirrors next. Those are custom." "Stay back, Sienna," Paulie hissed, wiping his forehead with a napkin. "Let him break it. We'll bill his father. Just don't make eye contact." Sienna looked at Kevin, who was hyperventilating near the spilled scotch. She looked at Dawson, who was raising the bottle, looking for a target. "No," she muttered. "I'm not cleaning up glass tonight." Ignoring Paulie's strangled gasp, Sienna grabbed a metal ice bucket from the service station. It was filled with half-melted slurry and freezing water. She marched across the VIP floor, her heels clicking a steady, authoritative rhythm that cut through the silence. Dawson turned as he heard the approach. He expected a guard. He expected a cop. He did not expect a woman with messy brunette hair tied in a bun, wearing a stained uniform. "Get lost!" Dawson growled, raising the bottle. Sienna didn't break stride. She walked right up to the heir of the Moretti crime family, looked him dead in the eye, and dumped the entire contents of the ice bucket over his head. The sound of the ice hitting the floor was deafening in the silence. Dawson stood there stunned. Freezing water dripped from his nose, his eyelashes, and soaked into the shoulders of his $5,000 suit. The shock was so absolute that his grip on the bottle loosened. Sienna snatched the bottle from his hand before he could react. She slammed it down on the table with a thud. "You're done," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was steel hard. "Sit down, shut up, and drink a water. You look like a toddler throwing a tantrum in a daycare." The entire lounge seemed to vibrate with terror. Paulie was already dialing 911, or perhaps a priest. Dawson wiped the water from his eyes, blinking. The rage that usually blinded him seemed to have short-circuited. He looked at the wet suit, then at the empty bucket in her hand, and finally at her face. He searched for fear. He found annoyance. "Do you know who I am?" Dawson asked. The menace was there, but it was dampened, confused. "I know you're the guy making a mess in my section," Sienna replied, reaching into her apron and pulling out a rag. She slapped it into his chest. "Dry off. You're scaring the customers and you tip terrible anyway." She turned her back on him. She actually turned her back on Dawson Moretti. She crouched down to help the terrified Kevin up from the floor. "Go to the break room, Kev. I got this." Dawson stood frozen, the damp rag clutched in his hand. His chest heaved. The vein in his forehead pulsed. For 10 seconds, the room waited for the gunshot. Instead, Dawson exhaled. A long, shuddering breath. He dropped back onto the velvet sofa, defeated by sheer audacity. "Sparkling," Dawson grunted. Sienna paused and looked over her shoulder. "Tap! You don't deserve the bubbles." She walked away, and Dawson Moretti, the butcher's son, sat there and drank the tap water. The consequences arrived 24 hours later. Sienna lived in a studio apartment in Pilsen that smelled perpetually of boiled cabbage from the neighbor downstairs. She was counting her tips on the chipped laminate counter, $42 and some change, when the knock came. It wasn't a polite knock. It was 3 heavy rhythmic thuds that shook the doorframe. Sienna froze. She grabbed the paring knife she used for cutting lemons and held it behind her back. She moved to the peephole. Nothing but black fabric. She cracked the door, leaving the chain on. "I already told the landlord I'd have the rest by Friday." "Miss Brooks?" The voice was deep, gravelly, and professional. "Who's asking?" "Vittorio Moretti." Sienna felt her stomach drop through the floorboards. She knew the name. Everyone in Chicago knew the name. The butcher. The man who ran the unions, the docks, and the politicians. Dawson's father. "He's here to kill me," she thought. "I embarrassed his son, and now I'm going to disappear." "Open the door, Miss Brooks. If we wanted to hurt you, we wouldn't have knocked." Logic argued that he was right. Trembling slightly, she undid the chain and opened the door. 2 men in suits stood in the hallway. They were roughly the size of refrigerators. Between them stood an older man leaning on a cane, with a silver handle shaped like a wolf's head. Vittorio Moretti was in his 60s, but he looked like he was carved out of granite. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and currently scanning her shabby apartment with distinct judgment. "May I come in?" Vittorio asked. It wasn't really a question. Sienna stepped back, still gripping the paring knife behind her back. "It's a free country." Vittorio chuckled a dry, rasping sound. He limped into the room, his guard staying in the hall. He looked at the peeling wallpaper, the single mattress on the floor, and the pile of overdue bills on the table. "You have a unique way of bartending, Miss Brooks," Vittorio said, turning to face her. "My son came home wet. He hasn't been wet since he fell in a pool when he was 6. "He was out of line," Sienna said, her chin lifting defiantly. "He was going to hurt someone." "He hurts people every day," Vittorio said, matter-of-factly. "That is his nature. He is volatile, unfocused, a blunt instrument in a world that requires scalpels." "Why are you here?" Sienna demanded. "To fire me. I already quit this morning. Paulie was too scared to look at me." "I'm not here to fire you. I'm here to hire you." Sienna blinked. "What?" Vittorio pulled a folded envelope from his inner jacket pocket and placed it on the table next to her pile of bills. "My son is a liability. He has cycled through 12 bodyguards in 6 months. He breaks them, or he fires them, or they quit because they value their lives. He respects no one. He listens to no one." Vittorio tapped the cane on the floor. "But he listened to you. My sources tell me you told him to, quote, shut up and drink a water. And he did." "I was angry," Sienna admitted. "You were fearless," Vittorio corrected. "Dawson feeds on fear. It's how he controls the room. You gave him none. That confuses him. That makes him a pause." Vittorio gestured to the envelope. "Inside is a contract. You will not be a bodyguard. You are too small to stop a bullet. You will be his assistant, his keeper. Your job is to ensure he attends meetings on time, stays sober during daylight hours, and doesn't kill anyone unless explicitly sanctioned by the family." Sienna laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You're insane! I'm a waitress. I serve burgers. I don't babysit mobsters." "The salary is $10,000 a week," Vittorio stated. "Cash, tax-free, plus a penthouse apartment in the Loop, fully paid for." Sienna's mouth snapped shut. $10,000 a week. That was her yearly salary in a month. It would pay off her father's gambling debts, the debts that were the reason she was living in this rat hole in the first place. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because Miss Brooks." Vittorio moved closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You have nothing to lose. I can see it in your eyes. And unlike the men I hire, you don't want to be him. You just want him to behave. And if I refuse, then you continue your life." Vittorio shrugged. "You pay your rent late. You dodge the collectors looking for your father, Arthur Brooks. Yes, I know about him. I know he owes the Russians 40 grand. I could make that debt vanish as a signing bonus." The hook was set. Sienna looked at the envelope. She looked at the peeling paint. She thought of her dad hiding out in a motel in Gary, Indiana, terrified of every shadow. "If he touches me," Sienna said, her voice shaking but firm, "if he lays a hand on me in anger, I walk, and I keep the money." Vittorio smiled, and it was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. "If he lays a hand on you, Miss Brooks, you have my permission to use the ice bucket again." The elevator ride to the top of the Moretti Tower took 40 seconds. To Sienna, it felt like a descent into hell despite going up. She was wearing a new suit Vittorio had had sent over, navy blue, sharp-tailored. It felt like armor. She clutched a leather portfolio to her chest. The doors pinged open, revealing a living space that was larger than her entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, currently battered by grey rain. Dawson was there. He was shirtless, doing one-armed push-ups in the center of the living room, while a news channel blared on a massive screen. His back was a canvas of scars and ink. He looked powerful, lethal, and undeniably impressive. He stopped mid-rep when he saw her. He pushed himself up, sweat glistening on his skin. He narrowed his eyes, recognition dawning slowly. "The Ice Queen." Dawson sneered, grabbing a towel. "My father said he hired a handler. I thought he was joking when he said it was the waitress." "Executive assistant," Sienna corrected, stepping into the room. She forced her legs to stop shaking. "And it's Sienna." Dawson walked toward her. He invaded her personal space, smelling of musk and aggression. He loomed over her, using his height to intimidate. "Let's get one thing straight, Sienna. You don't work for me. You're a spy for my father, a babysitter. I don't need a babysitter." Based on Tuesday night, you need a muzzle, Sienna shot back. Dawson's jaw tightened. You got lucky. You caught me off guard. Don't think you can talk to me like that here. There are no witnesses here. No cameras. Is that a threat? Sienna held her ground, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Because your father was very specific about the terms of my employment. If I quit, he handles you himself. Do you want Vittorio breathing down your neck, or do you want to deal with me? Dawson stared at her. The silence stretched thick and heavy. What do you know about scheduling? He asked, suddenly deflecting. I managed a diner during the lunch rush with a broken register and a cook on meth. I can handle your calendar. Dawson scoffed, turning away to pour a drink. It was 10:00 a.m. Put the bottle down, Sienna said. Dawson froze. Excuse me. Schedule says you have a meeting with the union reps at 11:00. You need to be sharp. If you walk in there smelling like whiskey, they'll think you're weak. Are you weak, Dawson? Dawson slammed the glass down, shattering it. Not the bottle, just the glass. I am not weak. Then drink coffee. Sienna walked past him to the expansive kitchen, spotting an espresso machine that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. I'm making a double shot. Go shower. Put on the grey suit, not the black one. The black one makes you look like you're going to a funeral, and we want them to trust you, not fear you today. Dawson watched her. He looked at the shattered glass, then at her back as she fiddled with the machine. He was used to women who fawned over him or men who cowered. He was used to screaming and getting results. She was ordering him around like he was normal. You're annoying, Dawson grumbled, but he turned toward the hallway. I'm expensive, Sienna corrected without looking back. There's a difference. 5 minutes, Dawson, or I'm coming in there with the hose. He stopped. A corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile, not really, but it was the closest thing to amusement his face had shown in years. He disappeared into the bedroom. Sienna exhaled, gripping the granite countertop until her knuckles turned white. 1 hour down, she thought. Only the rest of my life to go. The first week was a war of attrition. Dawson tested her constantly. He'd change meeting times without telling her. He'd drive his Maserati at 120 miles per hour, while she sat in the passenger seat, gripping the handle, refusing to scream. He'd leave guns on the coffee table just to see if she'd flinch. She didn't flinch. She locked the guns in the safe. She memorized his routes. She organized his chaotic life into a streamlined weapon. But it was on the second Friday that the dynamic shifted. They were leaving a high-stakes poker game at a private club in the West Loop. It was 2 a.m. The rain was torrential. As they walked toward the car, Sienna noticed something. The driver, a new guy named Marco, was sitting in the front seat. But the engine wasn't running, and Marco wasn't looking at his phone. He was staring straight ahead, his hands gripping the wheel at 10 and 2 rigid. Wait, Sienna said, grabbing Dawson's arm just as he reached for the door handle. What now? Dawson snapped, tired and irritable. I want to go home. Look at Marco, she whispered. He's sweating. It's 40 degrees out and the car is off. Dawson looked. He squinted through the rain. He saw the sheen of sweat on Marco's neck. He saw the way Marco's eyes darted to the rearview mirror, signaling something. Dawson's demeanor changed instantly. The brat was gone. The soldier appeared. He pulled Sienna behind him, shielding her body with his. Get back inside, he commanded, his voice low. Dawson, or go! He shoved her toward the club entrance just as the street exploded. A black van screeched around the corner. Automatic gunfire erupted, chewing up the pavement where they had been standing seconds ago. The windows of Dawson's car shattered. Marco slumped forward, dead before the glass hit the dash. Dawson drew a handgun from his waistband, a sleek, customized Glock, and returned fire, moving with terrifying grace. He didn't duck. He advanced, firing controlled bursts at the van. Sienna scrambled backward, falling onto the wet pavement. She watched as Dawson stood amidst the chaos, a dark angel of death. But she also saw what he didn't. A second gunman had exited the rear of the van, flanking to the left, aiming for Dawson's exposed side. Dawson was focused on the driver. He wouldn't see it in time. Sienna didn't think. The instinct that had made her a survivor in the slums of Chicago took over. She grabbed a heavy decorative stone planter by the club's entrance, adrenaline making it feel light as a feather, and hurled it. It didn't hit the gunman, but it smashed into a metal trash can next to him with a thunderous clang. The gunman flinched, distracted for a split second. He turned toward the noise. That split second was all Dawson needed. He pivoted, sensing the threat, and fired 2 shots. The flanker dropped. The van's tires screeched as the driver realized the ambush had failed. They peeled off into the night, leaving silence and the smell of cordite. Dawson stood in the rain chest, heaving. He looked at the dead gunman. He looked at the dented trash can. He looked at Sienna, who was sitting in a puddle, ruining her $1,000 suit. He walked over to her. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes. Only shock. He offered a hand. "You missed," Dawson said, looking at the planter. "I got his attention," Sienna replied, her teeth chattering from the adrenaline dump. Dawson pulled her up. He didn't let go of her hand immediately. His grip was warm, rough, and surprisingly grounding. "You saved my life," he said, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. "It's in the job description," she managed to quip, though her voice wobbled. "Keep the client alive." Dawson looked at her, really looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as a waitress, not as an assistant, but as an equal. "Come on," he said, guiding her toward the safety of the club. "I need a drink. And you deserve the bubbles tonight." They didn't go back to the penthouse. The attack had been too precise, the timing too perfect. Someone knew the schedule, and only 3 people had access to that calendar: Dawson, Sienna, and Vittorio. Dawson drove the backup car, a nondescript sedan kept in the club's garage, through the labyrinth of Lower Wacker Drive. The subterranean streets of Chicago were a world of their own, illuminated by sickly yellow sodium lights, smelling of exhaust and damp concrete. It was the perfect place to disappear. "You're bleeding," Sienna said. She was watching the dark stain spreading on the sleeve of his shirt. A graze, likely, but it needed attention. "I've had worse," Dawson muttered, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors. "There's a safe house in Bucktown, an old safe house. No electronic locks, no internet. Nobody knows about it except me. Not even your father, especially not my father." The admission hung in the air, heavy and sharp. The safe house turned out to be a converted industrial loft above a defunct textile factory. It was cold, dusty, and filled with shadows. Dawson killed the engine and ushered her inside, locking 3 deadbolts behind them. Only then did he allow himself to collapse onto a dusty leather sofa. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the jagged reality of pain. Sienna didn't wait for orders. She found the first aid kit under the sink in the bathroom, exactly where a meticulous person would keep it, and brought it to the living room. "Jacket off," she commanded. Dawson looked at her. Usually he would have snapped at the tone. Instead, he peeled off the ruined jacket and the blood-soaked dress shirt. Sienna's breath caught in her throat. His torso was a map of violence. Old bullet wounds and knife scars, and the fresh, angry red furrow on his bicep where the bullet had grazed him. "You look like a scratching post," she whispered, pouring antiseptic onto a gauze pad. "Occupational hazard." Dawson winced as she pressed the pad to the wound. The life chooses you, Sienna. You don't choose it." "I chose it," she said, her hands steady despite the trembling in her legs. "I took the job." "You took the money," Dawson corrected. His eyes were locked on hers, intense and searching. "Why did you throw that planter? You could have run." "Most people run." Sienna taped the bandage in place. She sat back on her heels, meeting his gaze. "I grew up in a house where running meant you got hit in the back. You face the monster, Dawson. It's the only way you survive." Dawson reached out. His hand, rough and calloused, cupped her cheek. It was a gesture so surprisingly tender, it made her heart stutter. For a moment, the line between boss and employee, between mob prince and waitress, dissolved. There was just a man and a woman in a cold room, survivors of the same storm. "You're not just a waitress, are you?" he murmured, his thumb brushing her jawline. "I'm the woman who keeps you alive," she whispered. He leaned in. The air between them crackled, charged with the electricity of near-death intimacy. His lips were inches from hers. She could smell the rain, the gunpowder, and the distinct, expensive scent of him. Buzz. The burner phone in Dawson's pocket vibrated against his thigh, shattering the moment like glass. Dawson pulled back the mask of the boss, slamming back into place. He answered the phone, his voice dropping an octave into lethal coldness. "Talk." "I see." Dawson's eyes hardened. He looked at Sienna, but he wasn't seeing her anymore. He was calculating. "Bring him to the warehouse. I want to know everything." He hung up and stood, the tender moment incinerated. "We have to go. My men caught the driver of the van. He's talking." "Dawson, get your coat, Sienna. The night isn't over." The warehouse was in the meatpacking district, a place that smelled of iron and old blood, even when it was empty. Tonight it was occupied by Dawson's enforcement squad, 6 men who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast. In the center of the room, tied to a wooden chair, was a man Sienna didn't recognize. He was battered, his face, a swollen mask of regret. Vittorio Moretti was there too. The patriarch stood in the shadows, leaning on his wolf-head cane, watching the proceedings with the detachment of a reptile. Next to him stood Bennett, the family's consigliere. Bennett was a slick man with oiled hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. Sienna had never liked him. He looked like a lawyer who enjoyed the fine print of a death sentence. "Dawson." Vittorio nodded as his son entered. "You're late." "I was busy not dying," Dawson retorted, walking toward the prisoner. "Who is he?" "Name's Alexei," Bennett said, stepping forward. "He works for the Kovac syndicate. Russians." Dawson grabbed Alexei by the hair, forcing his head back. "Kovac doesn't have the stones to hit me on my own turf unless he had help." "Who opened the door?" "Alexei." The prisoner spat blood. He looked terrified, not of Dawson, but of something else. His eyes darted frantically around the room, landing for a split second on Sienna. Sienna felt a chill crawl up her spine. "He says he was paid." Bennett continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "He says he was given the route, the time, the car details." "By who?" Dawson roared, racking the slide of his Glock. "By the daughter of Arthur Brooks," Bennett said softly. The silence that followed was louder than the gunshot. Dawson froze. He turned slowly to look at Bennett, then at Sienna. "What did you say?" "Arthur Brooks." Bennett read from the file, his voice smooth as silk. "A gambler. Owed 40 grand to the Kovacs organization. The debt was forgiven 2 days ago. The exact same day Sienna Brooks took over your schedule." Bennett threw a stack of photos onto a metal table. They showed Sienna's father shaking hands with a known Russian enforcer. They showed a bank transfer. Sienna felt the blood drain from her face. "That's a lie. Vittorio paid that debt. He told me he paid it." She turned to Vittorio, pleading. "Tell him you paid the Russians to clear my dad." Vittorio looked at her with cold, dead eyes. "I offered to Miss Brooks, but when I reached out, the debt was already gone. I assumed you had made other arrangements. It was a trap, a perfect airtight frame job." "Dawson." Sienna stepped forward, her hands shaking. "Look at me. I saved your life tonight. Why would I set you up and then stand in front of a bullet for you?" "Maybe you got cold feet," Bennett suggested. "Or maybe the plan was to kill the driver, not Dawson, to scare him into relying on you more. A classic infiltration tactic." Dawson picked up the photos. His hand was trembling, just slightly. He looked at the evidence, the undeniable proof of her father's compromise. Then he looked at Sienna. The warmth from the safe house was gone, replaced by a wall of ice. "Did you know your father's debt was cleared by the Kovacs?" Dawson asked, his voice dead. "No, I thought." "Did you know?" He screamed, the sound echoing off the metal walls. "I didn't know it was them," Sienna cried out. "Dawson, please. Bennett is lying. Look at him. He's enjoying this." Bennett's face remained impassive. "The evidence speaks for itself, boss. She's the leak. She's the liability." Dawson stared at her for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. He was weighing the logic against his gut. The logic said she was guilty. The logic said, trust no one. He lowered the gun. "Get her out of here," Dawson said, turning his back on her. "Boss," Bennett interjected, "the penalty for betrayal is—" "I said get her out," Dawson snarled, spinning around. "I don't kill women, not even traitors. Strip her of the phone, the keys, the money. Throw her on the street. If I see her in Chicago again, she dies. Dawson!" "No!" Sienna screamed as 2 guards grabbed her arms. "It's a setup. Check Bennett's accounts. Check the ear." One of the guards struck her across the face, silencing her. She tasted copper. Dawson didn't turn around. He stood rigid, staring at the prisoner, as the woman who had saved his life was dragged out the heavy steel doors and into the rainy night. As soon as the door slammed shut, Vittorio tapped his cane. "You are soft, my son. She should be in a barrel." "She saved me," Dawson said, his voice hollow. "I returned the favor. Now, we are even." Outside, the rain was freezing. Sienna was thrown onto the pavement of the alleyway, her blazer torn, her cheek bruising. The guards laughed and went back inside, locking the door. She was alone. She had nothing. No money, no phone, no protection. And the Russians were still out there. She struggled to her feet, shivering violently. She had to get to her dad. She had to find out why he had taken that money. A Blacktown car pulled up slowly to the curb at the end of the alley. The back window rolled down. Sienna froze. She expected Dawson. She expected him to come back to realize he was wrong. But the face in the window wasn't Dawson. It was Bennett. He smiled, a shark showing its teeth. "Get in, Sienna." "Go to hell," she spat, backing away. "You could run," Bennett said, casually lighting a cigarette. "But my friends in the Kovacs family are very eager to meet the woman who ruined their hit tonight. They are waiting at your father's motel right now." Sienna stopped. "Leave him alone." "Get in the car," Bennett commanded, his voice losing its veneer of politeness. "You're going to help us finish the job. Dawson Moretti has to die, and you're going to be the bait that lures him out." Sienna looked at the dark alley, then at the car. She realized then that the impossible thing she had done, taming the boss's son, was the easy part. Surviving the war she had just started would be the miracle. She opened the door and got in. Sienna sat in the back of Bennett's town car, watching the city blur into streaks of neon and rain. The plush leather seat felt like a coffin. Bennett sat opposite her, casually scrolling through his phone, as if he hadn't just orchestrated the fall of the most powerful crime family in Chicago. "You're quiet," Bennett observed, not looking up. "Usually people in your position beg, or cry. It's tiresome." "I'm saving my energy," Sienna said, her voice flat. She was pressing her thumb into her palm, using the pain to stay sharp. "Where are we going?" "A private facility. We need to make a call to your former employer. A proof-of-life video. Standard procedure." Sienna looked out the window. They were heading south toward the shipyards. Industrial wasteland. No cameras. No witnesses. "Why?" she asked. "Vittorio trusts you. Dawson trusted you. You're the consigliere. You have everything." Bennett laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He finally looked at her, his eyes dead cold. "I have a salary. I have a boss who treats me like a glorified secretary, and a boss's son who is a rabid dog. The Kovacs offered me a partnership, ownership. When Dawson is dead and Vittorio dies of heart failure shortly after I take the territory, the Russians take the ports. Everyone wins." "Except the Morettis," Sienna said. "Evolution, my dear. Adapt or die." The car slowed, turning into a gated compound filled with shipping containers. 2 men with assault rifles stood by the entrance. Russians. As the car came to a halt, Bennett leaned forward. "Here is how this works. You scream on camera. You tell Dawson you're sorry that the Russians took you. He comes to save you because despite his posturing, the boy has a hero complex, and we kill him. Then we kill you. Clean." The door opened. A massive Russian guard grabbed Sienna's arm and yanked her out into the mud. "Hey!" she shouted, stumbling. They dragged her into a rusted warehouse. Inside, it was a torture chamber dressed up as a movie set. A chair, a camera on a tripod, and a table of instruments that made Sienna's stomach turn. They shoved her into the chair. Bennett walked in behind them, checking his watch. "We go live in 10 minutes. Make her look distressed. But don't break her face. He needs to recognize her." One of the guards backhanded her. Sienna tasted blood again. Her head snapped back, dizzy. Think she told herself. Dawson isn't coming. He thinks I'm a traitor. He won't come for a traitor. But Bennett didn't know that Dawson had kicked her out. Bennett thought she was still the handler. "He won't come," Sienna spat, looking at Bennett. "He fired me. He knows I'm a liability." "He fired you because he was hurt," Bennett smirked. "But if he sees this," he gestured to the camera, "he'll come. Guilt is a powerful motivator." Bennett turned to the guard. "Set it up." While Bennett was distracted with the camera equipment, Sienna looked at her hands. They hadn't tied them yet. They were arrogant. They thought she was just a waitress. She spotted it, a heavy industrial staple gun sitting on a crate next to the chair, likely used for securing tarps. One chance. "Ready?" Bennett asked, pointing the camera lens at her. "Wait," Sienna said, her voice trembling. "Please, my dad. Is he safe?" Bennett rolled his eyes. "Your father is drinking vodka in a penthouse in Moscow by now. He sold you out for 50 grand, sweetheart. Deal with it." The rage that hit Sienna was colder than the rain. It wasn't hot. It was absolute zero. Her father hadn't just been in debt. He had sold her. "No one is coming to save me," she realized. "I have to save myself." "Okay," Sienna whispered. "I'm ready." The guard stepped closer to rip her blazer for the effect. As he reached for her, Sienna exploded into motion. She grabbed the heavy staple gun and swung it with both hands, driving the metal corner into the guard's temple. There was a sickening crunch. The man dropped like a stone. Bennett shouted, fumbling for his gun. Sienna didn't stop. She kicked the table of instruments over, sending scalpels and hammers crashing to the floor to create an obstacle. She dove behind a stack of pallets, just as Bennett fired. The bullet splintered the wood inches from her head. "Get her!" Bennett screamed. Sienna scrambled through the dark maze of the warehouse. She was small fast, and she knew how to navigate tight spaces from years of dodging grabby hands in crowded bars. She found a side door, locked. She heard heavy boots pounding on the concrete behind her. She looked up. A ventilation duct. It was 10 feet up. She climbed the shelving unit, her fingernails tearing against the metal. Gunshots echoed below her. She hauled herself onto the top shelf and kicked the grate open. She squeezed inside the vent, just as a spray of bullets pinged off the metal beneath her feet. She crawled. Dust and cobwebs filled her mouth. She could hear Bennett screaming orders below. She crawled until she saw a lighter grate leading to the roof. She pushed it open and scrambled out into the night air. She was on top of the warehouse. The rain was torrential now. She looked down, a 30-foot drop to a dumpster. Do it or die. She jumped. She landed in a pile of wet cardboard and trash. The impact knocked the wind out of her, and she felt something in her ankle pop, but she was alive. She rolled out of the dumpster, limping frantically toward the chain-link fence. She squeezed through a gap in the fence that a dog had dug out. She hit the pavement of the service road and ran. She ran until her lungs burned, until the warehouse was a speck behind her. She found a gas station 2 miles down the road. The attendant, a bored teenager, looked up as a soaking, wet, bruised woman in a torn suit burst in. "Phone," she gasped. "I need a phone." "Store policy says." Sienna grabbed him by the collar. "Give me the phone." The kid's eyes went wide. He handed her his cell. Sienna's fingers shook as she dialed. She didn't call the police. The police were on Bennett's payroll. She didn't call her dad. She dialed the one number she had memorized, the private line Dawson used for cleanups. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Speak." Dawson's voice was a graveyard. "It's Bennett," Sienna rasped, sliding down the counter to the floor. "Bennett is the rat. He's with the Russians. He has a warehouse at the docks. Sector 4. Silence on the other end. "Sienna." Dawson's voice cracked. You're supposed to be gone." "He tried to kill me, Dawson. He admitted it. He sold me out. He set up the ambush. He wants your territory. Where are you?" The voice was no longer dead. It was the roar of a waking dragon. "Texaco on 45th. I escaped, but they're coming." "Stay down," Dawson commanded. "If you see a car, hide. I'm coming." "Dawson," she whispered, looking at the headlights turning into the gas station lot. It was the black town car. "They found me." "Sienna." "Just kill him," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Don't let him win." The line went dead as the glass front of the gas station shattered under a hail of gunfire. Sienna dropped the phone and dove behind the counter. The teenage clerk was screaming. "Get in the cooler," Sienna yelled, shoving the kid toward the walk-in fridge. "Lock the door." She army-crawled toward the back exit. The bells on the front door jingled. "Come out, Sienna." Bennett's voice called out, smooth and mocking. "You're making this very difficult." Sienna looked around. She was in the back storage room, boxes of motor oil, windshield fluid, and a lighter on the shelf. She grabbed a bottle of lighter fluid and the lighter. She doused the doorway. As Bennett's shadow fell across the threshold, she flicked the lighter. Whoosh! A wall of fire erupted between them. Bennett cursed, jumping back. Sienna kicked the back door open and stumbled into the alley, but her twisted ankle gave out. She fell hard into the mud. She looked up. A Russian gunman was standing over her. He smiled, raising his rifle. "Das Vidania," he muttered. Bang! The Russian's head snapped back. He crumpled to the ground. Sienna flinched, waiting for the pain. It didn't come. She looked toward the street. A Maserati had jumped the curb, its front grille smashed. Dawson Moretti stood in the rain smoke rising from the barrel of his gun. He looked like a demon rising from hell. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing tactical gear. And he wasn't alone. Behind him, 3 SUVs screeched to a halt, and a dozen Moretti soldiers poured out. Dawson walked toward her, stepping over the dead Russian without looking down. His eyes were locked on hers. He reached her. He dropped to his knees in the mud, ruining pants that cost more than the gas station, and pulled her into his arms. "You called," he said, his voice rough. "I told you." She choked out, burying her face in his chest. "I told you I wasn't a traitor." "I know," Dawson whispered into her hair. "I was a fool, but I'm here now." He looked up at the burning gas station where Bennett was trapped. His eyes turned black. "Stay here," Dawson said, gently pulling away. He stood up and racked the slide of his gun. "I have a resignation to accept." The gas station was no longer a structure. It was a beacon of chaos illuminating the dark Chicago skyline. The fire Sienna had started in the back room had caught the oil reserves. Black smoke billowed into the storm, choking the air, while the staccato rhythm of automatic gunfire drowned out the thunder. Dawson didn't look at the fire. He didn't look at his men flanking the perimeter, cutting down the remaining Russian mercenaries with clinical precision. He only looked at Sienna. "Get her to the car!" Dawson barked at his lead guard, a giant named Tiny. "Take her to the safe house. If anything, and I mean anything, touches her, do not bother coming back." "No," Sienna gritted out, grabbing Dawson's wrist. Her face was smeared with mud and blood, her ankle throbbing with a pulse of its own, but her eyes were fierce. "I'm not leaving." "Sienna, look at you. You can barely stand." "He's mine, Dawson," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Bennett, he destroyed my life. He used my father. He tried to kill me. I want to see him fall." Dawson hesitated. He looked at the flames reflecting in her eyes. He saw the transformation. The waitress who had been afraid to spill a drink was gone. In her place was a woman forged in violence, demanding her pound of flesh. "Stay behind me," Dawson said, racking a fresh magazine into his rifle. "And keep your head down." They moved toward the burning building. The heat was intense, singing the hair on their arms. The Russians were falling back, their morale shattered by the arrival of the Moretti heavy hitters. Bennett was trapped. "Come out, Bennett!" Dawson roared, his voice amplified by the rage he had been suppressing for weeks. "There's nowhere to go. The Kovats are dead. The port is closed. It's over." A figure emerged from the smoke at the side of the building. It was Bennett. He was coughing, his expensive suit singed, holding a handkerchief to his mouth. He held a pistol in one hand, but he held it loosely defeated. He looked at the ring of Moretti soldiers surrounding him. He looked at Dawson. And then he looked at Sienna. I should have checked the vent. Bennett wheezed, a twisted smile playing on his lips. "Sloppy. I got sloppy." "You got greedy," Dawson said, stepping forward. He lowered his rifle and drew his handgun. This needed to be personal. "Drop the piece, Bennett." Bennett dropped the gun. It clattered on the wet pavement. "You know how this goes, Dawson. I know where the bodies are buried. I know the accounts in the Caymans. You kill me. The feds get a package in the morning. Your father goes to prison. You lose everything." Dawson paused. It was a valid threat. Bennett was the consigliere. He held the keys to the kingdom. Bennett saw the hesitation and smirked. "That's right. So here's the deal. I walk away. I take a flight to Brazil, and the Moretti family stays out of jail. A fair trade for my life." Dawson stood still. The rain dripped from his hair. He looked at Sienna. "What do you think, Assistant?" Dawson asked softly. "Is it a fair trade?" Sienna limped forward, leaning on the hood of a crushed sedan for support. She looked at the man who had ordered her death. "He's lying," Sienna said calmly. "He doesn't have a package. If he did, he would have used it against your father months ago to take over. He's bluffing. He's a gambler just like my dad." Bennett's smile faltered. "Besides," Sienna continued, her voice hardening, "he hurt me. He made me think you betrayed me. There is no deal for that." Dawson turned back to Bennett. "You heard the lady." Bennett's eyes went wide. He lunged for his dropped gun. Bang! Dawson didn't even blink. The single shot echoed in the night. Bennett crumpled backward, falling into a puddle of oil and rainwater. The threat was gone. The traitor was dead. Dawson holstered his weapon and turned to Sienna. He didn't say a word. He simply scooped her up into his arms, ignoring her protest, and carried her away from the fire through the rain toward the waiting car. The recovery took 2 weeks. Sienna spent them in the master bedroom of Dawson's penthouse, her ankle elevated, watching the snow fall over the city. Dawson didn't leave the apartment. He ran the empire from his living room. He brought her food. He changed her bandages. He was attentive, quiet, and terrifyingly protective. But there was a wall between them. The elephant in the room. Her father. On the 3rd Friday, the door to the bedroom opened. Dawson walked in dressed in a black suit. "Get dressed," he said gently. "There's someone you need to see." Sienna felt a knot in her stomach. "Is it Vittorio?" "No." They drove to a small private airstrip on the outskirts of the city. A single private jet was idling on the runway. Standing by the stairs of the plane, shivering in a cheap coat, was Arthur Brooks. Sienna froze. She leaned on her crutches, staring at the man who had raised her. The man who had sold her to the Russians for $50,000. Arthur looked up. When he saw Sienna, he started to cry. Not tears of joy, but tears of guilt and fear. 2 of Dawson's guards were standing behind him. "Sienna," Arthur blubbered, taking a step forward. "Sienna, baby, I'm so sorry. They told me you wouldn't be hurt. They said they just wanted leverage. I had to do it. The sharks were going to break my legs." Sienna looked at him. She remembered the nights she worked double shifts to pay his rent, the times she lied to landlords for him, the love she had wasted on a black hole. Dawson stepped up beside her. He placed a hand on the small of her back. "You have a choice, Sienna. He can get on that plane. It's going to a rehab facility in Arizona, a locked facility. He stays there for 5 years. He gets clean. He never comes back to Chicago." Dawson paused, his voice dropping. "Or the plane leaves empty, and we leave him here, with me." The implication was clear. Dawson was offering to kill her father for her, to remove the source of her pain permanently. Arthur fell to his knees. "Sienna, please, I'm your dad." Sienna looked at Dawson. She saw the darkness in him, the willingness to become a monster for her sake. And she realized that she didn't want him to carry that sin for her. "Let him go," Sienna whispered. Dawson looked at her, searching her face. "Are you sure? He's dead to me already." Sienna said, her voice hollow. "Killing him won't change anything. Let him live with the shame, if he has any." She turned to Arthur. "Get on the plane, Dad. Don't call me. Don't write. If you ever set foot in Illinois again, I won't stop him next time." Arthur scrambled up the stairs, sobbing, fleeing the judgment of the daughter he had failed. The jet engines whined, and the plane taxied away. Sienna watched it go. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders, a weight she had been carrying since she was 16. She finally let out a breath she had been holding for years. "You're too good for this world, Sienna," Dawson murmured, wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "No," she said, leaning into his warmth. I just don't want to clean up any more blood. I'm off the clock. 6 months later, the Onyx Lounge had been remodeled. The glass tables were thicker, the security was tighter, and the VIP section was no longer a place of fear. It was the throne room of the city. Vittorio Moretti sat in the corner, sipping an espresso. He looked older, frailer. The war with the Russians and the betrayal of Bennett had aged him. He had officially stepped back from day-to-day operations. The music changed. The crowd parted. Dawson Moretti walked in. He looked different. The wild, unkempt rage was gone, replaced by a cold, calculated power. He wore a suit that fit perfectly, his posture relaxed but commanding. On his arm was Sienna. She wasn't wearing an apron. She was wearing a floor-length emerald gown that hugged every curve, her hair cascading down her back in polished waves. On her finger sat a diamond large enough to choke a horse. She didn't look down at the floor. She met the eyes of every person in the room, the politicians, the rival bosses, the police, captains. She held their gaze until they looked away. They reached the VIP booth. Vittorio stood up. It was a sign of respect he had never shown anyone, let alone a woman. Dawson. Vittorio nodded. Then he turned to Sienna. Bella, you look dangerous tonight. I learned from the best. Sienna smiled, sitting down. The waiter, a nervous young kid new to the job, approached the table with trembling hands. He was holding a bottle of Macallan 25. Mr. Moretti, the kid stammered. Mrs. Moretti, can I get you anything else? Dawson looked at the kid. He looked at the bottle. He remembered the night he had tried to smash the place up, the night a waitress had dumped ice water on his head and saved his soul. Dawson smiled. He reached out and took the bottle gently. Relax, kid, Dawson said. We're just here for a drink, but bring my wife a sparkling water with lime. Tap is fine, Sienna corrected, winking at Dawson. Sparkling, Dawson insisted. You earned the bubbles. As the waiter scurried away, Dawson took Sienna's hand under the table. He squeezed it tight. You know, he whispered, leaning close to her ear. They're all terrified of you. They say you're the one who really runs the city. Sienna took a sip of her water, looking out over the club she used to clean. She looked at the man who would burn the world down for her. Let them talk, Sienna said softly. As long as they know one thing. What's that? That I'm the only one who can handle you. Dawson laughed, a genuine happy sound that filled the room. He raised his glass. To the impossible, he said. Sienna clinked her glass against his. To the impossible. And that is the story of how a fearless waitress tamed the most dangerous man in Chicago. It wasn't about changing who Dawson was. It was about finding the one person strong enough to stand beside him in the fire. Sienna Brooks didn't just survive the mafia world. She conquered it not with a gun, but with a bucket of ice water and a backbone of steel. What do you think, if you were in Sienna's shoes, would you have forgiven her father, or would you have let Dawson handle it? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want more intense romances with twists you won't see coming, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.